Fellas, it's been a weird week in MMA. We're coming to the week after Blankfield versus Bob, which I think was the worst card in UFC history, after Macy Barber ended up pulling out of the fight just before the walkout because she had a seizure backstage, creating the worst card in UFC history. I think the last time this happened was Lewis versus Spivak, where Derek Lewis ended up pulling out during the card. We also had Tom Aspinall turning heel this week. I said it, Tom Aspinall, he's a nice guy, but if he wants to get this Jon Jones fight, he needs to do a heel turn, and I feel like respect doesn't work with Jon Jones. We saw DC and Jon used to be friends. DC starts calling him out on his steroid use, and then eventually the fight gets made. Aspinall is respectful to Jon disrespects him back, and then we've recently seen Tom Aspinall on the Good Guy podcast with DC and Chael. We've seen a bit of a new side to Tom Aspinall compared to what we normally see.
We know Jon's a religious man, so I want to say God bless him moving forward. I'm the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. I'm ready to take on all...
He's gone from saying, I respect you, Jon, and basically just sucking up to Jon Jones, to I'm the undisputed champion, fuck Jon, happy retirement, Jon, and not just kind of, pushing the respect aside for Jon, but the entire heavyweight division.
I will retire Jon Jones without even fighting him.
And again, this is aged well. He wants to be the first to wish Jon all of the best in his retirement, and he's just disregarding Jon Jones now, fading him into irrelevancy, which I think is what you need when you get in a Jon Jones fight. Jon Jones ain't taking the division seriously. Rather than signing these petitions, rather than, trying to urge Jon to take the fight, if he's not going to take the fight, forget about him. Aspinall's the champion. Let's get the division moving, and let's forget about Jon Jones. And I'm kind of starting to think that, based off that interview, maybe the Jon Jones fight isn't happening. Maybe it is going to be Aspinall versus Cyril Gane, because the way that Aspinall's talking is that Jon Jones ain't going to be fighting. But just to do a bit of a, a rundown, since February 2024, Maraba's fought 4 times. Since February of 2020, Jon's fought twice since the Dominic Reyes fight, against, obviously, Cyril Gane and Stipe Miocic. And then you've got Don Fry, who fights 3 times in one night. You can't take Jon seriously. And he recently tweeted saying, just wrapped up the biggest seminar in fuck it history, bloody blah. Thank you, Tom Aspinall, for all the pre-promo. In reality, Tom Aspinall ends up reacting with, my pleasure, Jon. Told you I'm not an asshole. Glad you're enjoying retirement. Absolutely ratioing Jon Jones under his own tweet. And again, kind of being nice to Jon Jones, but it kind of sneak dissing Jon Jones. And again, it made no sense how Jon Jones called Tom Aspinall an asshole when he's one of the most respectful, liked guys in the world of MMA. And Jon Jones, of all people, has the audacity to call Aspinall an asshole.
When are you fighting Tom?
I was waiting for it. When are you fighting Tom? Like, governor. Right now, Tom and I have agreed to wait for the UFC to make their announcement.
Something that confuses me about this is Jon Jones is out here saying we can't announce it legally, we're waiting on the UFC. Aspinall himself has said that Jon's retired and we've been waiting on him, and even before this whole kind of heel turn, he was saying that he's waiting on Jon, not the UFC. I feel like Jones is only saying this to shut the crowd up and kind of, so he doesn't have to have an awkward moment in front of everybody, because he's been tweeting things like, I don't know if I want to call it retired, essentially showing disinterest and not, signs that he's not going to be fighting, which confuses me about this whole seminar that he's doing. And on this whole Thailand trip, it just feels like he's putting on this whole fake happy act. He's smiley faces everywhere dancing, but then on the other hand, he's on Twitter 12 hours a day tweeting at Aspinall fans and responding to every hater he's got. But something that brings me hope is the UFC posted the interview with Aspinall and DC and obviously Chael Sonnen about the whole Tom Aspinall trying to move the heavyweight division 1, which kind of gives me hope. But is the Jon Jones fight happening or not? I just ended up watching the Tom Aspinall Fight Lab, where he ended up mentioning during the Fight Lab that he's looking to get 2 fights this year. And at this point, if that's the case, well, if it can't just be November against Jon Jones, because obviously he's not going to be able to fit 2 fights in this year. Maybe it is going to be Cyril Gane versus Tom Aspinall. That kind of reinforces the idea. If he's going to fight twice this year, he's not going to just fight Jon in, obviously in November and not have another fight. Maybe Paris has recently been announced, but I'd assume that Paris is going to be like, Sergey Pavlovich versus Cyril Gane, because they've both got fights coming up. I have no idea what's going on with this whole Jon Jones, Tom Aspinall situation. I don't think anybody does.
When I went into Jon's locker room, and he says, I need somebody. And he says, is someone getting on the ground for me, right? And so he goes down, he says, just, put me in guard, right? And then Jon decides to do a sexual act with him.
Every single day, Jon Jones doesn't help this whole case of him and his sexuality. I mean, you saw the Thailand trip where he's grabbing that guy's hair, where he's swimming in a pool full of Dagestani fighters. We've seen images like that before, and now there's these allegations of him forcing to wrestle UFC commissioners who have a BJJ experience and then threatening, to do it without any consent. When was the last time we saw Jon with a female?
Oh my God, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
BJ Penn's been arrested. Now, obviously, over the past couple of months, BJ Penn's kind of gone insane, saying that his own mother and his own family is a clone and she's been taken away by the government, and he's essentially been recording a mental breakdown over the past couple of weeks online, and it was only a matter of when, not if he's going to get arrested. And now he's been arrested because of this. It says the latest arrest stems from Penn failing to appear in court after violations of him essentially just harassing and abusing his family.
Can we call an officer that I know against these guys? Yeah.
And this kind of just like the downfall of BJ Penn, it really just shines a light on CTE in MMA. And it's not just the regular fighter, but the fact that BJ Penn took so many beatings towards the end of his career. His career went on way too long. And you've got to assume that this is some sort of, heavy case of CTE. I mean, he's nearly half of his fights are losses. He is on the biggest losing streak in UFC history. He's been knocked out on the streets. He thinks his family are clones. And now he's been arrested. This has to be a generational fall off. And even if you look at the comments, he's saying that CTE doesn't exist. It's as fake as the coronavirus, which is a massive symptom of CTE. And for a legend in BJ Penn, by the way, I'm not trying to disrespect him and just start throwing him under the bus now that he's got probably CTE, because he's a legend. He's one of the greatest of all time. Some people still might have him as one of the greatest lightweights of all time. And for the fall off to be this big, and this just shines a light on the likes of GSP, Demetrius Johnson, DC, Aldo, Stipe, some of the other GOATs that have managed to not only, retire when necessary, be clean athletes, be great people, not take unnecessary damage, and then of a mess of a human being. You've got to respect those athletes even more. Anyway, Bryce Mitchell versus Gene Silva continues. And obviously, Bryce Mitchell and Gene Silva, we knew this was a massive rivalry a few months back leading up to UFC 314, but the rivalry has now continued. A couple of months back, there was a clip of Bryce Mitchell chopping wood, and then the fighting nerds kind of just ganged up on him in the comments. Kyle Brallo said it's easier when the target don't move with a laughing emoji. Gene Silva was posting gifs of himself, I assume to kind of rub in the fact that he's beating him. And there's recently been a new clip going around of Bryce Mitchell. Yeah, keep Ian Garrett and all the other vegans away from this clip of Bryce Mitchell. But Gene Silva's piped up again under this Bryce Mitchell post, commenting, only way for you to hit someone. Again, mocking Bryce Mitchell. Gene, you trolled him at the press conference. You jump scared him at the weigh-ins. You were mocking him during the fight, and you choked him out and boxed in his face. I have the sneaky suspicion you don't like this dude, but let the guy live. He's now commenting under his post, way after he's, obviously choked him out cold and beating him. Stop rubbing it. And this guy's on the gym called the Fighting Nerds as well, which you'd expect the opposite behavior. But I feel like in all seriousness, if Gene Silva did turn heel, he'd be a superstar. Like if he went on Twitter and rather than just sacking off Bryce Mitchell all over again, if he went for like Lerone Murphy or Diego Lopez or Martha Evloev or essentially any top featherweight contender, I think Gene Silva could be a really good heel for the featherweight division. We saw how it worked against Bryce Mitchell when he was the favorite. Imagine a heel version of Gene Silva. Anyway, Cody Garbrandt has now turned emo. Obviously before, he looked like a pretty regular dude smothered in tattoos, kind of the guy you'd see walking down in GTA. Took the loss to Davison Figueiredo, and it's not really been going well for Cody Garbrandt. Talking of Cody Garbrandt, he's now got a fight booked with Raoni Barcelos, the guy that just fraud-checked Peyton Talbot. I'm actually going to go with Cody Garbrandt to win this fight. I understand the grappling threat that Barcelos brings, but it's easy to look good when you're grappling against Peyton Talbot, who we knew had terrible grappling coming into that fight, versus a former champion Cody Garbrandt who's got pretty slick wrestling and he's rapid on the feet. I'm going Cody no love to win this one by some late TKO. Anyway, this week marks the summer period of the UFC, and it is gorgeous. The absolute lineup we've got coming up in the UFC in the next couple of months throughout summer is phenomenal. We've got so many good cards. This might be one of the most generational runs the UFC have had. I mean, look at the schedule. If you take away the fight now between Albazi and Tyra, which is still probably going to be a good main event, but it's in the Apex, it's one of the weaker cards. We have just endless, sick cards for the UFC. After having to go through these terrible Apex cards, we finally got a good period of time in the UFC. And on top of announcements, Azamat Bekaev is now going to be taking on Torres Finney. Now, if you don't know who Azamat Bekaev is, you've got to check out his Twitter. And he's been kind of trolling Torres Finney on Twitter over the last couple of months. He said he's going to be taking his school lunch. He's been thinking of a theoretical fight between him and Torres Finney, kind of just trolling Torres Finney all over Twitter. And he tweeted saying that he wants to fight him on the UFC Apex early prelims as a joke. And the UFC have actually gone through and made this fight between Azamat Bekaev and Torres Finney. I find it ironic. The UFC don't make the biggest fight, but they have to make Bekaev versus Torres Finney. But that fight's been made. On top of fight announcements, we've also had Dan Ige versus Patricio Pitbull. I'm taking 50k to win this fight. I think this is a bad matchup for Pitbull, a guy with elite BJJ in Dan Ige who hits like a fucking truck. Obviously just got that controversial win over Sean Woodson, but still a slick boxer. I think a 38-year-old Patricio Pitbull who didn't look amazing against Yair Rodriguez. I'm taking 50k to get this one by KO. We've also got a couple other announcements. We've got UFC Paris in September, which was to be expected. I'm expecting it to be either Garn, Fiora, or Benoit Saint Denis. Maybe an Imavov versus Caio Brallo matchup, but I'm expecting to be either, like I said, Garn, Pavlovich, Fiora versus another contender. contender, or maybe BSD and Garbrandt. We've also got Francis Ngannou with the middleweight division against Robert Valentin, who just got fraud checked by Torres Finney. We've got Steve Erceg back against Alex Perez, which should be a good fight. I know a lot of people are complaining about the fact that Steve Erceg's getting another step up in the rankings, but it should be a good win for Steve Erceg. And UFC No Shea has now been turned into a fight night in Texas. To go from a pay-per-view in Mexico to a Texas fight night is a complete switch around. I assume it's still going to be a Mexican event though. But yeah, that's just this week in MMA so far. There's not much going on, but there's also so much going on at the same time. It's been a weird week for the MMA community. Let me know your thoughts on what's been going down this week. Thank you for watching.